Hello, welcome to MAFT UK and welcome to my tutorial on shooting for the beginner. So, you want to know how to shoot? Well, let me start by saying I take nothing from the professional shooters out there. There are guys that have forgotten more than I know, and I'm fully aware of that. However, the fundamental basics always remain the same, and what you need to be able to do is pick up a rifle for the first time, inspect it, make sure it's not damaged, bore sight it, set your sight, your eye relief, and then apply your marksmanship principles to get a good group and hit your target pretty much every time. So here we go then. Number one, rifle. We need a rifle. What do we need it for? What are we shooting? Are we shooting vermin, small vermin, big vermin, deer, bears, elephants? What are we shooting? Because you need to choose something which is suitable for the prey or quarry that you're after. You probably gathered that anyhow, but that's not the point. You must make sure that you don't overkill, is probably the right way of putting it. If you shoot a rabbit with the 308, the rabbit disintegrates. If you shoot a rabbit with a 17 HMR, the rabbit can still be eaten. And that's the sort of example that I'm using. So when you go to the shop, you will see rifles in various stages. You may see a rifle for sale which has its a scope mounted on it. It may have a moderator mounted on it, and it may have various bits and bobs like the bipod mounting on it too, and you buy the whole thing as a package. Now, usually most people look after their rifles. If you're one of those guys that fall in love with your rifles, perhaps you need to go and find something else to do, because although they are rather exciting to play with, they are tools to do a job, and that's how you should look at it. And you should give it the utmost respect, not fuck it. So here we go. What do we look for? Well, first and foremost, with any rifle, we need to make sure that it's not riddled with rust or bent. And the only way to do that is to physically check it out. First of all, look along the barrel, look along the timber. There we go. Everything seems to be fine. I know this is fine. It's mine. This I actually bought second hand. It's much cheaper. It was in mint condition. It's not so good condition now. It's been used quite a lot. And I'm looking at the trigger housing, the trigger. You could even, ensuring that there was no rounds in, magazines, etc. Even play with the trigger, see what movement we've got with the trigger. You know, is it loose? Is it wobbling? Does it feel right? When you look at where the bolt goes, is there any initial damage on the top? Usually you get a lot of damage around about here where the bolt folds over the rifle itself. That's usually the place where it gets all the wear and tear, and you can give that a good look at too. It should have its bolt with it. Again, give it a once over, look for any signs of misuse, damage, rust. Make sure everything appears to be in good working order, and that's all you can really do initially. You can only have an initial look at it. Once we've looked at the outside, we need to look on the inside. Lots of people aren't very good at cleaning their rifles, and some people are very good and maybe a little bit too much cleaning their rifles. Alright, some may argue that you can have a rifle which is too clean. I think as long as it's clean and it's not covered in carbon, then I think that's perfectly adequate. I don't think it needs to be sparkle every single time, especially with a 17 HMR. If I had a £10,000 rifle, I perhaps would think differently about that, but hey. So we've had a quick look on the outside. We now need to look on the inside, but just before we do, perhaps want to have a look at the crown, which is the very end of the rifle itself. And you are looking for damage, excessive wear on there too. Some people will use particular types, bore snakes they're called. Bore snakes are okay for a quick battle clean. I personally, I do have them, but I take them with me out in the field, but when I'm at home I use my cleaning rods and my other equipment. I think boar snakes have a potential to cause a little bit of damage, and I mean on the ends of the rifle there, you can, as you're pulling it out, if it's not perfectly straight, you can start to burr around the ends of the crown. And we're going to have a quick look to make sure everything's fine, and I can see there's no damage, and I know there's no damage. A good sign of wear and tear would be pits, these little pits, and it's not the end of the life of the rifle. Should you see any damage on the end there, you can get that recrowned, filed down again by the person who's probably selling it you actually, but at least you can identify it and say, look, I'll buy it, but I want that recrowned first, because obviously there's a little bit of damage there. And then you need to look down into the barrel itself, and yes, you need to stick your face at the end of the rifle. Now some people may look from this end, and that's all well and good, and you can look down there and you can see perfectly fine, but the best way to look down a rifle, the best way to see if everything's okay on the inside, is to look from the other end. I've found over the years, you're looking for the twist, making sure that there's no pits or damage, and that the twist appears to be okay, no damage to that as it travels down the barrel. And basically you're looking for anything that may give you cause for concern. So the way I do that to stop myself poking me in the eye is to grab the rifle on the end there, and I place my fist over the end, and then I will lift the rifle and look through the end like so, making sure that I point it towards a window or source of light. When I point that towards a light, as I can see there, that's perfect shot all the way down through the barrel, and I can actually see part of the trigger mechanism sticking at the end there, and I can also see, as I move my eyes away, that there are no pits and no damage, and a good clean barrel. If you see mess, carbon build-up, crap in there, and you're buying this off the shelf, it's probably a bad sign that the person who has handed this in didn't really look after it properly. The person that's selling it you didn't even look at it. So he is definitely, or that person is definitely selling you something they know nothing about. If they haven't even looked down the barrel, then they don't know what they're selling you, and that's a good clue to tell whether or not this rifle's any good or not, because people don't look after it and they leave it dirty, and someone's trying to sell it to you who doesn't even know it's dirty. Is that the sort of person you want to be buying a rifle off? So make sure you have a good look, good scan of the rifle. Don't listen to the sales pitch, listen to your heart. You know, if you get a warning sign, if you can see a little crack in the stock, this is obviously timber, you know, you don't want it. Not good to you. Dints, bangs and scratches, perfectly normal. That's what happens when you're out in the hulu, but there you go, that's what to look for. So we are happy that we are going to buy this rifle. We're happy that everything's in good working order. We're just going to drop the bolt in there to see if everything works fine. We're just going to fire off the action. Okay, some people might say that's not a good idea to fire dry fire, as they call it. And yeah, I get that. Constant use of not having a round in there isn't very good for the firing pin. But it has to happen one or two times, and it's not really going to destroy the rifle. You know, it's going to take some years for some damage to really occur. So you just want to make sure that everything works fine. On this model, we have to squeeze the trigger to enable us to insert the bolt. It's only a short action, it's only a short round. Let's try the safety catch. I know what you're thinking. Always point the weapon in a safe direction before squeezing the trigger. That's what you're thinking, and you're absolutely right. But it is a safe direction. I know there's no rounds in it, and so do you. And also it's for the purpose of the camera. So there we go. Good click, Good trigger mechanism. Let's try that one more time. Not too hair much trigger, good couple of pound squeeze on that. Good action, nothing loose, good solid click. Fine, no issues. Okay. Right, so we've decided to buy this rifle. It's absolutely fine. The bolt's fine, the trigger's fine, the bore and the crown are absolutely in mint condition, and we're happy that this is a good rifle in good condition. What do we need to do next? Well, we need to rebuild it. First of all, we need to ensure that we carry out one of our first marksmanship principles. And to enable us to do that, we need to mount the sight. Now, sights come in various shapes and sizes, and they can be an absolute fortune. I think the rule of thumb is if you pay £500 for your rifle, you at least want to put a £500 scope on it. I understand why they would do that, but this is a Hawk Sport HD 412x50, and I've had this now 3, maybe 4 years. And I take this out with me, and it can be mounted on either an air rifle or a rimfire, which this one is, and I've had absolutely no issues with it whatsoever. Great luminosity in the dark, and I'm not advertising the scope, I'm just saying it didn't cost me £500. In fact, it was less than 100, maybe even 80. So you don't need to go mad with your sight, okay? Especially if it's your first sight. If you've got it, if you've got the money, brilliant. There is a noticeable difference, but if you haven't, there's nothing wrong with this type. Just don't go mad straight away. So we need to put it onto the rifle, but we need to put it onto the rifle in the right way. We need to make sure that we have what we call eye relief. Eye relief is distance from your eye to the rear of the sight until you get the correct sight picture. Without the correct eye relief, your head will be moving forward and backwards, and you'll never see the right picture, you'll never get the right shot, and it's not comfortable. And we have to do this. It's always sometimes best to do this with two of you, but you can do it on your own. And for me to do this on my own, I'm actually going to remount my bipod that I have, and just help me do it on my own, okay? When you initially come to mount your scope, it is important to make sure that the mounts you're using actually are big enough to allow for your lens apertures. And what I mean by that is, there's no point getting a short mount if, when you try and fit it to your rifle, that the aperture of the front of the scope does not clear the rifle barrel. That's one thing to check for. It's always a good idea if the shop actually asks you if you would like them to mount your scope for you initially. Say yes. Saves you doing it. At least you get the right mounts as opposed to you choosing them in the shop. And if you're not sure, just ask them which ones shall I use on this. Just be careful they don't sell you something which you don't need, like a picture rail, something like that. You certainly don't want anything like that for this. And now we need to put this onto our rifle, and all we're going to do initially is put in our mounts. I'm just going to fix them, and we do that like this. Screws. Now initially we're going to put our mounting brackets on first of all, and we're going to give them a quick tighten up with the right size Allen key. But I'm not going to go mad, I'm not going to over tight anything, just above finger tight. And then we're going to place on our sight. and put our tops on. Now, you will notice that they don't touch. That's because we need to tighten down on top of them, and if you over tighten them you can actually damage your sight. So that's something to be very, very careful of. We do need now just to drop in each one of our screws and get an initial bite into the thread. Do not tighten up at this stage. So now I'm pretty much ready to carry out our first part of one of the marksmanship principles, and we're now going to adjust the sight to get the correct eye relief. Now you do need a full sight picture, and I know that if I point the rifle down that way I can get a full sight picture, and what I'm looking for is to ensure that the rifle is perfectly plumb and it doesn't have a cant on it. And what I mean by that is that it's not leaning from left or to the right in any way, that it is perfectly in line going down towards my sight picture. You don't need levels or anything to do that with, you just need the ability to see what's going on. So it certainly helps with a bipod, especially when you're on your own. Make sure that we have our Allen key with us. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to put the rifle firmly into the shoulder, and I'm going to move this sight back now until I get the perfect eye relief. I slide that forward, the view or the window gets smaller and I get a black circle around it. If I pull that back, I can see the whole picture through the scope, and that's what I'm trying to achieve. And in fact I may just even, in this case, move the rear mount back slightly to enable it to come closer to me even more. And that's why we don't tighten things up, because this is the important bit. There we go, I'll just move that rear mount back now a bit further. Just tighten that up again. Right, well I'm happy with that position of the sight. And what I'm also looking at is the crosshairs, and I'm making sure those crosshairs are absolutely vertical and horizontal, and that the sight is well lined up with the rifle. Now starting from one corner, then go to the other corner, start to tighten them up. Rotating from each corner so as you not to put more stress on one side than another. The gap either side of the sight should be equal. Have a quick check, make sure the cant of the rifle and the scope are also correct. In turn, slowly but surely, tighten down the first one, but again, not too tight. Okay, happy with that. I'm going to go on to the next one now, and I'm happy with that. What I'm going to do now is tighten those up, nice and gentle. Starting in one corner, over to the next, and then finally Just give our mounts a good twist to make sure that they really got a good grip of the rifle. This now is the sight alignment, i.e. aiming, is correct. My eye relief from my eye to the sight is perfect from my shoulder and the position I will be firing this rifle in, and every time now I bring my eye or head down into the firing position, I will get the perfect picture through the lens. Just like that. The sight alignment, i.e. aiming, is correct. What we need to do now is move on to the second video. The second video will cover bore sighting. All rifles, weapons usually carry out bore sighting before they carry out any zeroing. Basically what that is looking down through the barrel to ensure that the R sight is more or less roughly pointing in the same direction as it needs to, and that when we do put our first few rounds down the rifle, that it's not going to go all over the place. It's not going to go over the field to our left or field to our right because the scope is that far off. So let's look forward to the next video, which is bore sighting and zeroing.